Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zack Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait.
Welcome into the Can't Wait podcast. Lots to get to today. Haason Reddick, drama. Of course, it's been a couple of days, but we'll get into that. The Jets getting ready for the Panthers, preseason game number 2, and Zack is in Charlotte, was there for joint practices today, so we'll break that all down. And we'll also talk about the draft picks, how they're coming along, and some of the undrafted free agents who have impressed as well. But before we get to that, Zack, we have some breaking news here on the Can't Wait podcast. Next Tuesday, I don't know what the date is, next Tuesday, will be the final episode of Can't Wait as we know it. Marissa's going to be here. Hopefully Connor's going to be here if he remembers. We're going to get the whole gang together. We're going to have one last send-off of the Can't Wait podcast. But that being said, that is not the end of our podcasting journey. More news to come as far as that goes. But Tuesday will be the last Can't Wait podcast.
Yeah, it's definitely bittersweet for sure. I mean, you've been on it longer than I have, and we'll talk about this on Tuesday. We won't do all of it today, but we do I am very excited about what we have coming. Like we're not talking about it yet. We're saving that for Tuesday, and the podcast we'll have a new name, new home, but I'm still going to be covering the Jets for the Athletic. I want to make that clear. Like that's not changing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're both fully employed by the Athletic still. Make that clear. We're full-time employees. We're thrilled to work for the Athletic.
And we're still good. As Jet the Angel just said, I need Can't Wait as my favorite. We're not, like I said, it's not going to be called Can't Wait. It'll be on a different podcast feed. I'm trying to tease as much as I can without like giving too much away. But Jeff just made a comment that actually he said cool an announcement for an announcement.
That was our goal. We're just gonna keep making.
It's like when they do teases for trailers, like they do like a short, like tomorrow this trailer is gonna come out, and so we're doing that. But man, there's some funny comments coming in. But like I said, it's bittersweet. Like this podcast has been awesome. Can't wait. It's fun. Like the ties to the Bart Scott saying and all that stuff is great. And Connor and you guys did a great job building it up. But for reasons we'll get into at some point in the future, like we're taking it to a new home with a new name, and we're going to change some things up. Like our goal is to, change it up a little bit while still like keeping the spirit of Can't Wait, I would say.
But tune in Tuesday for sure.
Yeah,
we'll
tune in
stream
Tuesday.
It'll be a lot of fun. We'll do a little bit of reminiscing. I'm assuming there'll be Jets news because there always is. So we'll get into that a little bit and we'll break it all down. But yeah, lots more to come. Exciting things. But that's it for now. You have to wait for the next announcement in 5 days.
Marty Miller had a great title idea. We did pick a title already. We're not going to share yet, but it says "We Can Wait Forever." So maybe that's
we're hoping not to. Right, Jets fans, let's not wait forever. Let's get it done this year. Let's win a Super Bowl. All right, let's get into the team. That's it for announcements for today. I mentioned you're in Charlotte, Connor, checking out Panthers and Jets joint practices leading up to the game on Saturday night. So we'll get into the rookie class, how they're doing in Reddick, but I wanted to start because it's the freshest thing with what happened today at practice. By all accounts on social media, the offense got going, but it was slow to begin with, right?
Yeah, I would say it was definitely a sloppy start to practice. Garrett Wilson even acknowledged it after the fact that they started slow, and we can't do that. He said, and honestly, I was a little concerned at the beginning because I always say that joint practices, while they're not the be all end all, I do think they can be predictive of like what's coming to a degree. Like if a team comes out and dominates or is dominated, then you might feel pretty good or pretty bad about the team you cover. If a unit is struggling, like last year with the Jets offensive line, that was like the big takeaway. The Jets offensive line absolutely destroyed. They showed it on Hard Knocks. Robert Saleh like laying into them. And then the offensive line was a disaster. It wasn't necessarily because of that practice, but they had a lot of other issues. But yeah, it started out and, Rodgers in 7-on-7 was okay. And then as you get to the 11-on-11, there's a few passes that he missed. There was a pass that went off Alan Lazard's hands and into the hands of a defender, which, has become unfortunately a pretty common thing. Like Alan Lazard, it seems, either has great practices where he's catching touchdowns like he did the first like 5 days of camp, or he's deflecting passes into the other team's hands. And so you don't love that. Rodgers had another interception later in practice where he very clearly didn't see the linebacker, like just straight up didn't see him. And the guy picked it off pretty easily. Like it wasn't near Rodgers' intended target. I'm trying to think off the top of my head some of the other plays. There's one where he threw it behind Malachi Corley. There's another where he threw it so far behind Alan Lazard that I think we all kind of figured Lazard ran the wrong route. And this kind of led to a discussion with some of the other beat writers. It's like funny how your brain works depending on the quarterback you're covering, because if Rodgers misses a receiver by a lot, you're like, oh, the receiver had to mess up. Whereas like Zach Wilson or Tim Boyle or, so the bevy name a bad quarterback over the years with the Jets. If they miss, I think the assumption is that the quarterback messed it up a lot of the time. Fair or not on both of them, just kind of like the way when you get accustomed to a quarterback playing a certain way, when something bad happens, the brain goes to a certain way. Then sometimes you watch replay or they'll explain it after the fact. But so yeah, I think it was sloppy to begin. But then as he's done throughout camp, when he's even had bad days or when the offense has had bad days, he's really, really good in the 2-minute drill. Like if you want to be excited about something with the offense, I think it's Rodgers' ability to run he's everything. It seems like the guys don't think or, they're just like, all right, we need to get to our position. We need to do what we're supposed to do. Rodgers is going to snap. He's going to pass it immediately. And they move up the field really quick. Like, by the time they did that, move the ball a period at the end, I think they had 3 backup offensive linemen in. They had Wes Schweitzer, Carter Warren, and Olu Fashanu. He was at right tackle again, which I think he'll be all week, was what Saleh said before practice, or alluded to that possibility. But so the offensive line, like guys were getting through, especially in the middle. I think Joe struggled a little bit, but they were getting in. But Rodgers getting rid of the ball so fast, and there's nobody as good as him besides maybe like Patrick Mahomes, getting rid of the ball as soon as he snaps it. And so they're moving up the field real quick, He airs it out. He mixes in a high lob. I think it was probably trying to draw a pass interference, frankly, but he threw it really high down the field to Garrett Wilson. The Panthers defensive back basically tackled Garrett before the ball even got there. So there was defensive pass interference, moved the ball up like 40 yards. And then he closed out that drive with a touchdown pass to Garrett. So I'd say a couple things. They're very good at the 2-minute drill and the move the ball period, which like that was those stretches where there were some games last year where the time management was a disaster. They're slowly going to the line. Like that's not going to happen with Rodgers at quarterback, and probably won't with Tyrod either. And number 2 is things might go wrong in other facets, but things tend to go right when Rodgers targets Garrett Wilson, I would say. Like the two of them, maybe things aren't going great when he's looking for Alan Lazard or whatever it is. He's trying to find the rookies but when he's looking for Garrett Wilson, it works almost every time because Garrett is either going to go get the ball or Aaron's going to throw him open. So there was a couple really good throws between those two guys. But yeah, overall, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a great day for the offense, but the last period definitely changed the tone because up until that point, I did not feel good about the offense, and I was starting to get concerned about how I would come out of this, and fans getting all mad about negativity or whatever, which they were last year, by the way, with the offensive line, and then it was right. But that last drive gave me a little more confidence. I think it's clear to me, especially if Aaron doesn't play in the preseason, which he seemed to imply when he spoke to us the other day, that he doesn't feel the need to. He might just be saying that for the mics. I don't know, but I think there's going to be some rust that this group needs to knock off to start the year, especially because you have these offensive linemen. They are getting reps together, but not a lot of reps. They're still shuffling Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses in and out of the lineup, AVT as well. You have new receivers. You have Malachi Corley still learning the ropes. So, I mean, people getting used to Aaron Rodgers and his cadence and his hand signals. So I think week 1 is going to be interesting to see how ready they are right away. So if I was going to grade the offense today, C+ probably, but it would have been a lot lower if not for that last drive.
All right, switching things over to the other side, and I know you always have the caveat that you don't get to necessarily see both sides of the ball fully because you have to pick one or the other. But it sounds like the defense wasn't maybe as dominant as you would hope or what we expect, right? We just expect in these practices that, hey, the Jets defense is going to dominate. But I guess Bryce Young had some moments. They they almost got into a fight. Maybe Michael Clemens stirring the pot again, as he's been known to do.
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the fights because that's always like the thing that anybody outside of like the two fan bases care about is the fights. I happened to catch the end of one, which is honestly, I saw something I had never really seen before. So DJ Reed gets beat like fair and square in the end zone against Terrace Marshall, who like goes up and catches it over him. And then as DJ Reed's on the ground and Marshall's celebrating, he like tosses the ball at DJ Reed. A bunch of guys are shoving each other. You see DJ Reed pick up the ball.
I mean, that would be a flag in a game. That would be 15 yards.
Right there. And then, it gets worse. So DJ Reed picks up the ball while everybody's shoving each other. You see, and Terrace Marshall's walking away with like a coach around his arm or something. You see Garrett grab the ball, run over to find him, and just throw it at him. Like he just went out of his way to throw the football at him. So I think clearly the defense was frustrated, especially the Panthers celebrating as much as they were in that moment. So that was the first one. I didn't see the Michael Clemens one. I did see what reporters who were there saw. Sounds like he just kind of held on to the running back a little too long. The running back shoved him. Michael Clemens, I guess, hit his helmet or swung at his helmet. The running back swung at the helmet, and then there was a lot of, hold me back kind of type situation. And these usually don't escalate into real fights other than when Aaron Donald runs around with wielding a helmet like he did that one time. It's interesting because I think it was last week, Sauce Gardner alluded to before the Washington practice. He said something like Robert Saleh basically told us there's a certain consequence for if you throw a punch or if you get into a fight, and nobody wants to see that consequence. And so that's why you didn't see any fights really in the Washington practice. But between DJ Reeds and Michael Clemens, I do wonder if they are seeing whatever that consequence is. I'm hoping I can find out what it is at some point because it's very like ominous. They just keep saying consequence. I don't know if it's something funny or something they can't
financial
or financial. So, it was a little feistier, and that's why Robert Saleh has said that he only does 1 day for joint practice. He prefers 1 day for joint practice because the second day is usually when things get really out of hand because it's, one team beat up the other team the day before. You see the quotes they're saying in the press. The next day, you're a little more motivated.
Coaches are on them about it, all that stuff. Yeah.
And so that's why he avoids it. So it would have been kind of fun if there was a second practice of these for that sake. But in terms of the defense, for what I was able to watch, it was not their best day. So usually with these joint practices, the teams end with like a sort of scrimmage where first one team's offense goes against the other team's first team defense, and then vice versa, and then both sides do their backups. The Panthers offense was moving up the field pretty easily. Jonathan Mingo beat DJ Reed down the sideline. And then to close it off, they just had a huge gap in the middle of the defense, and where Mike Boone, the running back who had gotten to the fight with Clemens earlier, had an easy 25-yard touchdown. Like, it was just not ideal. I will say Quinnen Williams was not there. He was they sat him out because his shoulder was sore. Saleh says not to worry about it. I realize when Saleh says that sometimes people get worried anyway, but it sounds like he's okay. So I think it was Tanzel Smart was in on that play, and it was just a wide open hole in the middle. And you don't like to see that. And again, I wasn't watching the defense that closely, but there was a lot of defensive pass interference penalties apparently. And some Panthers writers complaining that the Jets corners hold the other team's receivers a lot, which I think is I don't think it's the reality. I think they're just like aggressive in the way they defend. And that's the rep Sauce has, and I think it's BS. Yeah. But so, I'm not worried about the defense. As CJ Mosley made an interesting point, he said with some of these joint practices, they have less time to like get ready because they get there and they have to get ready in the practice. So there's like less of a build up. And so it takes them a little longer to get going in the joint practices when they're on the road necessarily than like if they're at home doing it. So I think they were off to a slow start in his mind because of that. So I get it. I will say, and in terms of like positives, I saw Tanzel Smart get a sack at one point. Tony Adams, I thought, had a pretty good day in the reps I saw. And then I caught some of the D-line versus O-line reps they were doing, like where one defensive lineman's rushing. They have all 5 offensive linemen, but he's only going one-on-one with whoever he'd go against in a game kind of thing. Will McDonald like destroyed some poor backup offensive lineman, just spin move past him in a second. I thought Eric Watts looks pretty good. Tack McKinley had a nice spin move and got by. Leonard Taylor got stuffed, but he's been playing pretty well lately. So, yeah, that's kind of the defensive review that I'm able to give just based on what I was able to see, which obviously wasn't a lot.
All right. Robert Saleh spoke, obviously, and he mentioned some of his terms, but his other one is that he said, iron sharpens iron, which we know to be true here on the Can't Wait podcast. We can't get away from this stuff, Zach.
Oh, man. It's Connor. I mean, it's Connor's fault. He framed the question in a way that is always going to get that response anyway. But Salah also knows the background with Connor, to be fair. So he played into it. So Connor asked something about like Garrett going against Sauce every day in practice or vice versa. I forget the specific. And Salah like looked Connor in the eyes and said it and then started cracking up. I literally was like, I was really hoping you were going to say that. So mainly to like to annoy Connor because that's his whole shtick. But yeah, so I mean, does iron actually sharpen iron? Who knows? I'm not a welder.
But it is good to practice against good talent. All right, let's move on to this rookie class. And you have a story out on The Athletic. People check that out, where you go through the whole draft class and kind of how they're going to this point. We're not going to hit everybody, but let's connect on some of the keys and then some of the free agents as well who have impressed. But to this point, big picture, it feels like this draft class, it's not necessarily the great draft class of 2022, but there's some pieces here, at least early on. Let's start with the first round and work our way through. Olu Fashanu obviously shined on Saturday night. Zack, 25 snaps, 15 of them were pass protection, and he graded out great.
Yeah, especially in pass protection. He looked really good. It is interesting to me that he had that great game, and then they turned around and they've had him at right tackle all week. And Salah made it sound like the other day he's going to stay there for at least a little bit because they want him to get like legit experience there. And what that tells me, number one, is that maybe they're not as high on like a Carter Warren as they had indicated in the offseason before they drafted Olu, because, I think the idea was that Olu would be the left tackle backup and Carter could be the right tackle backup. By getting Fashanu those reps, I think they want him to be their swing tackle, and that maybe reduces how many players you have to carry on game day kind of thing. Like you don't need to carry him and Carter Warren necessarily. I think Max Mitchell's ahead of Carter based on what we've seen in camp. So I think that's interesting. And then just in general, I don't know. I was surprised that they're making him like so exclusively go on that side. You get it, but long term he's a left tackle. But ultimately they want their best five out there, and you take the starting five out of the picture, he's their next best offensive lineman. So based on the fact that he practiced there today, I would guess he's going to be there on Saturday for the game as well. And so those will be very interesting reps. But yeah, I think it's been a pretty good camp for him. It's pretty clear to me, and you even see like in some of the way he uses like his footwork or his punch in protection, that he's learning a lot from Tyron Smith. And I think he's really taken to heart the things that he's showing him, what he's seeing. And the fact that Olu is that smart and able to, replicate that. Like if you're going to copy anybody, Tyron Smith is the one to do it. And Olu has the body to do that, even if he doesn't have like the huge hands that Tyron has, because they're like insane. But I think that relationship is really, really paying off. And we'll see Olu's going against backup defensive linemen in preseason games. But, if the season comes around and they have to play Olu, he's getting this experience now. Like you feel a little better about it, I would say.
Yeah, Mackay never had that sort of mentor on the roster that he could kind of look up to. And obviously the injuries, it doesn't really matter if you have a mentor, if you're getting hurt all the time. All right, Malachi Corley, third round. He looked pretty good Saturday too. 4 catches, 27 yards. And I know Garrett talked a little bit about him after practice today and the fact that it takes a little while for receivers, but it's starting to click.
Yeah, I think the message from coaches throughout camp when you would ask about Malachi was that, he still has a long way to go in terms of route running. He's learning the intricacies of the NFL. I think they made him earn his reps with the first team because he wasn't getting them at first. And, Garrett, he's as good as it gets with like press conferences. Like you can ask him any question, he's going to give you a very thoughtful answer. And I asked him like how Malachi has been progressing in his mind. And he's like, yeah, when you first get the NFL, especially like with Aaron at quarterback, but just in general with the NFL, like everything's faster, the concepts are way more complicated, this, that, and the other. And so in the beginning it can be overwhelming and it's hard. And, maybe your teammates, they need to help you more than as time progresses. And he said now he doesn't feel like that when they call a play that he needs to pull Malachi aside and tell him he thinks Malachi's getting it. So if like the mental side of things is there for Malachi, and then now he can just focus more. I mean, he's still learning everything obviously, but like now he can focus on the physical part and getting open and making plays after the catch. Like if you remove the thinking and he's playing fast, then the Jets are in good shape. And he has come on lately. I didn't think he stood out very much in the beginning of camp. As it's gone on, he's made some plays down the field. We can't talk specifics, but they've been creative in the way they've used him on some team drill stuff. And he seems like he's going to be a factor in the return game. He had a really good return the other night as a kick returner. He told us today he never returned any kicks or punts, I believe, in college. So, but it's like a new world because of this new kickoff rule. I think It's essentially like you're running an offensive play because they have to wait. And then as Malachi explained, you can see where the holes are and where you need to run to. And so I think it's going to make it more interesting for a guy like him, especially someone who seeks out contact. So it wouldn't surprise me if we get to week 1 and Malachi and Xavier Gipson are their 2 returners. And, maybe Malachi is long-term the guy because his ceiling is higher than Xavier's, I think, because of his ability to break tackles. So yeah, I've been impressed with Malachi lately. He still has some room to grow. And I think Xavier is still ahead of him on the depth chart at slot receiver, but I do think he's made progress, and I feel better about the idea that he's going to help right away than I did maybe a couple weeks ago.
Braylon Allen's probably been the most impressive in this group, or I shouldn't say that. Saturday was the most impressive in this group in the preseason game. 6 carries, 54 yards, including a couple of chunk plays mixed into that. He's a guy that obviously gives them that kind of shift with a big body who can take on contact.
Yeah, to me, he's frankly been the breakout success story of training camp. Not to put, I think last year it was Tony Adams because he kind of emerged out of nowhere. If you remember, and all of a sudden he was this entrenched starter who was making plays and intercepting Aaron Rodgers. Braylon Allen is just there's a photo that went viral of him standing next to Isaiah Davis. And so this is a lot of times the listings for heights on rosters are wrong. I feel like they got Braylon's wrong in the opposite direction. Usually they say somebody's taller than they actually are. He was standing next to Isaiah Davis. I think Braylon's listed at 6'1" and Isaiah's 6 foot. And it did not look like 1 inch. And I think Breece Hall is listed at 5'10" or 5'11". Maybe those guys are not as tall as their heights are. So maybe that's why they look so small next to him. But he looks huge. And I was talking to Andy Vasquez, who covers the Jets for NJ.com. He's one of those players that you look at him physically and you're like, how did he fall so far? If somebody who looks like that is going to be good. It just makes me, it's not quite the same, but I just think of DK Metcalf where if you walked up to DK Metcalf, you'd be like, oh yeah, that guy is a star. And he'd fell to the 3rd round. So I know he's a running back in Braylon, but anyway, he keeps impressing me more and more. I think as he's able to actually take on tackles, he showed great burst the other day. I saw Warren Sharp tweeted that he had the best, I think, explosive play rate out of any running back in the preseason so far. I know the run blocking was really, really good. I think that deserves a shout out, but Braylon didn't make many plays today. There wasn't a lot to see in terms of the running game, but I think he's making a case to be a part of this offense. And Breece Hall is going to be the bell cow. He's going to get, however, 80% of the carries, whatever it is. But Braylon is both useful as a pass catcher and, more importantly, he's useful in protection. I think he is what I think they wanted Dalvin Cook to be. He's a guy who can get the tough yards. He can catch some passes out of the backfield, and he can, take on blitzers. I think he's pretty good at that for a rookie. So if that's the way he gets on the field, I think he's going to play a role. And then if, in terms of fantasy football, I don't know that there's many better handcuffs than him because I think this is going to be a good running team. And if Breece hypothetically goes down, I think Braylon is going to get a huge workload. So for fantasy purpose, I would stash Braylon late in the draft, frankly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, Quantez Stiggers was the darling of the draft, obviously, the Canadian football success story, didn't play college ball. Nice play on Saturday night on the corner blitz to pick it up that it was a running play, stop the run. But overall, besides that play, what does it look like the long-term future is for Quantez?
Yeah, I mean, I think long-term he's a starter, just based on what we've seen. We'll see how he does in more and more in games, but Jeff Ulbrich brings this up every time he gets asked about him. He just has a level of confidence and kind of that it factor that you just the way he carries himself. It's man, this kid's going to be good. He's just confident and the lights aren't too bright for him. Maybe there's something to the fact that he played in the CFL instead of in college, frankly. He is not scared of the moment. And I think that is, if you start on that baseline and then if you have all the physical tools and the mental side of things, like you can be a star. But like he has that aura about him, I would say. And so I'm very curious to see how his rookie year plays out and how his career plays out. But I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. Like, and I don't say that lightly because he's fifth round pick, didn't play in college. Like he has a lot of room to make up, obviously. But I've just been so impressed with him to the point where, like, if hypothetically DJ Reed or Sauce Gardner, God forbid, got hurt, Michael Carter II already hurt, still hasn't practiced in a while, by the way. Like, Brandon Echols has shown to be okay in like spurts, but like if he plays for too long, I think his warts get exposed. I don't know. Like, do we see Quanta Stigger playing at all this season is a big question I have. Because he can earn his way. The coaches really, really love him. And if we thought the Jets don't usually cut their draft picks anyway, but if anybody thought he was fighting for a roster spot before, after he was drafted, I don't think anybody thinks that now, I would say.
All right, beyond the draft, a couple of guys that have stood out as far as undrafted free agents. You already mentioned one earlier in the show, and that is Eric Watts, who looked good today. Played a lot on Saturday night against the Commanders. Didn't really flash necessarily in that game, but overall, I think from day one, he's kind of been on the radar here. Yeah,
I mean, I get made fun of by some of the beat writers because I'm always like, people don't usually live tweet like the backups stuff, but like when I see him make plays, I point it out because he physically just like stands out to me because he's 6'5", 277, and he has really good athleticism. So it's like another one of those, like if somebody looks like that, they're probably going to be pretty good, I would think. So I think he just like kind of has something. Again, he didn't stand out in the game, but the way when Aaron Wycott and the D-line coach was asked about him the other day, just was glowing talking about him. He was like, I thank God that he probably wouldn't agree with this, but I thank God that he went undrafted because we were able to sign him. And so he feels like a Stiggers type and that he's a developmental guy to, or you can even go back to Bryce Huff. Like when Bryce Huff was signed by the Jets, he wasn't the fully formed product that he became a couple years later. He had the speed and the juice off the edge and stuff, and Watts is a different player, but the Jets did a great job developing Bryce Huff into who he became. And I think Eric Watts has the tools to be like a guy worth developing. So I think he's going to make the 53.
All right. One more rookie, Leonard Taylor, did have a sack fourth quarter. Yeah. So you know who that's against in a first preseason game. It's not like he was facing the top line Commanders offensive line, but he's also been good defensive tackle.
Yeah, the biggest thing we've been asking about him for the last week because he had that game and he's showed up and practiced a little more. The recurring theme seems to be like he just needed to get adjusted to the NFL, to the Jets defense, where they asked their defensive linemen to do things differently than he did in college, where it's attack. Like that's the main instruction. And so I think some defensive linemen, they come from different systems and it takes them a minute. It took him a minute, but the talent's clearly there and he's on the right track. I think there's a spot to be won for depth at defensive tackle. They have four guys that I would say are locked in: Quinnen, Javon Kinlaw, Lecky Fotu, and Solomon Thomas. And I would think they would want another backup. So I lean towards him making the team as well. So if you get two developmental defensive linemen that guys that had draftable grades, I think you feel pretty good about that. And the way they rotate defensive linemen, at some point they'll need one of them this season.
All right, final topic for the day. Haason Reddick, still talking about it, but obviously earlier this week, things took a turn, I guess for the worst, you could definitely say, where Reddick officially put in the request for a trade. The Jets officially came out and said they're not going to trade him. But beyond that, we haven't made any progress. Meanwhile, you look ahead up to New England, where Matthew Judon had put in a request for a trade. And he was dealt to the Falcons for a third-round pick yesterday. Obviously, these are two different situations. When you look at Judon coming off an injury, the Patriots not appearing to be going anywhere this season, makes total sense that they would trade him, right? Like get the third-round pick, get the big money out of town, no problem. This is a different thing here. Although the similarity, I guess, is that the Falcons haven't agreed on a deal with Judon either. So technically they could get to the same place as this, but I have a feeling that they're probably going to get something done. They are desperate for pass rush help.
The Falcons will
where are
overpay
we,
him.
Zach?
The Falcons will happily overpay him
Right.
too, I imagine. Whereas the Jets are maybe not as willing to just throw around money because their owner doesn't want them to spend I don't think that they want to pay him $25 million a year on top of them feeling like he needed to prove it. And so there's a lot of, it's a very weird, ugly situation where both sides feel like they were either lied to or that some sort of trust was broken. And I think Hassan Reddick has really dug in on his stance that he's not reporting. I was talking about this with someone today. I think what Judon did, the hold in, I think the misjudgment that Hassan had, and whether he's upset with how the Jets handled him or, who said what or what said who, he absolutely should have held in. And by hold in, that means usually guy reports the camp, is getting the money, and oh no, I have a headache. I think I have a concussion.
And Judon was on the sideline for the Patriots in their first preseason game, coaching up other players. He's been.
And Reddick has not really met his teammates. He doesn't have a real relationship with any of them because I don't even know if many or any of them have crossed paths with them in the NFL. So if I was him, that's how I would have approached it. But when he decided to not show up, that's what he's stuck with. And so we're, I think something like 23 days into his holdout of $50,000 a day.
23 times 50,000 is
on top of, they had the ability to levy a $300,000 fine. We don't know if they did, but it sounded like they would. He gave up a $250,000 workout bonus, $100,000 mini camp. The Jets are not going to trade him, and he seems pretty intent on not showing up. And so I don't know where the middle ground is. Aaron Rodgers kind of interestingly alluded to the idea of trying to talk to him to get him to come and saying that being here is better for you than not. But I don't get the sense that's going to work with. If it does, then we'll see. We'll know the kind of influence Aaron really has here. But it
seems ugly, maybe he just said that though.
Yeah, I mean, you never know with him. But we've kind of talked about it a bit on here. I think one side views it as Hassan said he was going to show up, and then maybe we'd figure out the money later. Whereas I think the Hassan side, but just to backtrack, so it's complicated. So Hassan, everybody's pointing back to Hassan's comments at his intro press conference, including myself, because it was like, whatever happens, I'll be there. I'm gonna work my ass off. I think he reported that day and took his physical because his camp, for whatever reason, was under the impression they were going to agree to a new deal or they were going to restructure or whatever it was. They were going to guarantee his contract is not guaranteed for injury. It's non-guaranteed. So I think he maybe was under the impression, whether it was poor communication on either his agent or from the Jets or whatever it was, he thought he was going to get the money that he thought he deserved. And then when he realized that wasn't happening, before he realized that wasn't happening, he told coaches, he told the Jets, I'm going to be there for the whole offseason. I'm going to be there for camp. And then he realized that what he thought was happening didn't happen. And then he's like, wait, they lied to me kind of thing. So I think both sides kind of feel like they were lied to because the Jets thought he said he was going to show up for everything. And he thought they said they were going to pay him right away. Whereas the Jets are now like, they're not saying this publicly, but they pretty much are like, we're not going to negotiate with you until you're here. And we want you to prove that, we want you to prove that you deserve to make $25 million. Whereas Hassan Reddick, whole thing from the beginning was if I'm going to stay with the Eagles, it needs to be where I'm getting paid what I think I deserve, which is around $25 million a year, which, by the way, I don't think any other teams are willing to pay him this offseason. But, this is a guy that's fourth in sacks over the last 4 years. He is turning 30. There's a lot of pros and cons. The Jets ultimately, even knowing the risks, they thought it was worth it because they were only trading a third-round pick 3 years from now. So it was hard to argue with. I don't even blame them for making the trade without a deal in place. I think the issue is more they made the trade for Hassan Reddick, and then they got rid of John Franklin Myers, and they didn't re-sign Bryce Huff. So now you're kind of in this hole here where they view Hassan Reddick as a luxury more than a necessity. I think he's more important than that because I don't trust Clemens and Will McDonald yet. I mean, if those guys come out, it's going to be very interesting because I think we're going to watch in week one let's assume that Hassan's not reporting before week 1, which is my prediction. If I don't have, that's not a report. This is me predicting. He doesn't show up week 1. I think one of the sides is going to come out of week 1 or week 2, whatever it is, with more leverage, because we're either going to watch Will McDonald and Michael Clemens get absolutely stuffed and the Jets pass rush struggles, or one or both of them is going to play really well and the Jets have a dominant win, or like something like that, where the other one side can be like, all right, we don't need you, so hold out as long as you want. Or the pass rush is terrible. Hassan Reddick's like, all right, you guys need me, give me some money. So it's gonna be fascinating. I don't think the Jets are going to give in to what Hassan wants. I thought there was always going to be a middle ground. There might not be a middle ground anymore because both sides are pretty angry. So maybe Aaron Rodgers can be the mediator or somebody, but it just seems like a situation that's not going to change anytime soon.
And just pushing it forward, if he doesn't report, the Jets can continue to control his rights going forward.
So I need to look at the details. I've heard mixed things. I heard one thing that if he's active for at least 6 games, then that counts as an accrued year maybe. But if not, then his contract tolls to the next season and then they'd hold his rights still. I'm not sure if that's accurate, because I'd also heard if he holds out through, I think it was like week 6 or week 8, that they would have his rights for next year. So I need to clarify that. But yeah, basically if he holds out for all or most of the season, the Jets are just going to have his rights next year, and then they can choose to either cut or trade him, or just keep carrying his rights until he shows up eventually, which doesn't sound like
that would be spite.
But this doesn't feel like a thing that's going to have a solution anytime soon. And maybe I just jinxed it and it'll happen as we hang up this podcast.
It doesn't feel like a thing that's ever going to have a good solution.
No.
At this point.
And at the very least, so what's happened now, and I personally, and Torrey Dandy's his agent. I don't know Torrey. I've heard really good things about Torrey. He's supposed to be a good guy. And I don't know Hassan personally, but if I was them, I would have Hassan Reddick come out, and whether it's a string of tweets or do a one-on-one interview, I'll happily do the one-on-one interview, Hassan, if you want to talk to somebody. I can give
come
you
on
my
the
number.
podcast.
Just DM me. Come on the podcast. Come on our new pod.
We'll bump Connor Tuesday if Hassan wants to come on.
Like, Hassan should give his side of the story at this point, because right now he's being dragged through the mud through reporting about the Jets side of things. Frankly, I think some of the Hassan side stuff has come out. Diana had some reporting about it, but I think right now his reputation has gone way downhill because of the way this has been handled. I do think the Jets have caught some flack too. Some of it deserved, some of it not, because they didn't have a contract agreed to before they got him. But Hassan, if he were to come back to the Jets, this fan base we talked about this last time. I think this fan base is itching to boo him right now. So he's putting pressure on himself, and on top of, he'd have to approve, himself in terms of the money and stuff, like with the money he thinks he deserves and all that stuff. So if I was him, I would come out, make a statement, post a video to Instagram, however you want to do it. I think he should address his perspective of what happened, so it's not just the other side controlling the narrative.
CJ Mosley today said, I don't really have an opinion. He hasn't been here. It hasn't really come up. We're getting ready for the season. That's not really our focus. When he comes, if he comes, we'll be here, and he'll have to adjust and learn real quick. If not, it is what it is, which isn't a positive. It's not like, hey, we're all players. We get it. Go get your money. It's definitely not that,
This is why I love CJ Mosley, because we were actually talking about this too, because we were talking about how great he is with us. He can't help but be honest, and he's like super nice. And it's almost kind of scary how guys like that can just like flip the switch and just try to murder people on a football field, like while being like the nicest person off of it. But yeah, CJ is the captain of this team. He's the leader everybody looks to, especially on defense. But I think in general, he's the captain of this team. He's been here longer than Aaron Rodgers. While I think Aaron kind of dictates the culture, I think CJ is a guy that everybody looks to for we're gonna follow his lead. And so him saying that, I think, is definitely notable. And I think these guys are probably tired of getting asked about Hassan Reddick, considering they've never met him, or a lot of them haven't. So I thought his quote was a good one, and the truth. Like, there's nothing they can do about it. So we got to focus on what, we all have jobs to do. So I think Jets fans, I think for a little while, did not like CJ Mosley because of the money and the injuries, and he sat out COVID. I feel like that's gone the other way where I think everybody loves him now and they should. They like when CJ's gone, this team is going to miss him. And I don't know when that's going to be. It was actually kind of funny. Connor asked him today, like, has he thought about, when he wants to retire or anything like that? And CJ joked, he's like, as he's walking off, he's like, well, I hadn't really thought about it before, so I guess I got to think about it. I guess I've reached that stage. Right?
Thanks for putting that in my mind.
So if CJ retires suddenly, you can blame Connor, is what I would say.
There you go. It is. I don't think any of us expected Mosley to be on the team this year.
Yeah,
right? With that contract,
or even through his whole contract. Yeah,
right. That this would be the year that they would get rid of him, but he's just become such an important part and was willing to restructure and all that. So here he is leading the way. All right, that's going to do it. I think. Anything else to throw in at the end here, Zach?
Nothing I can think of specifically. Just make sure you come back on Tuesday because
Tuesday,
a big, nice, emotional episode for us.
Another announcement. We may cry. There may be tears. We'll take some questions, I think, too. If we'll just make it like loose and we'll reminisce a little bit.
We'll cover some Jet stuff, but yeah, I think it'll be a lot of reminiscing, especially because you guys were all there for the early days of the pod, which I wasn't.
So we'll talk to everybody then Tuesday on the Can't Wait podcast. Thanks for tuning in today, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.